Morning. Committee will come to order, and we're supposed to have votes in just a little while, so we're going to try to get off as quickly as possible and on time, and then move pretty rapidly so we can get through as many of the testimonies as possible here. So before I begin my opening statement, I'd like to thank Mr. Kelly, who's not with us right yet, but he's chairman of subcommittee on investigations, oversight, and regulations, for inviting me to participate in Monday's field hearings in South Haven, Mississippi. I enjoyed the Southern hospitality and appreciated the opportunity to talk shop with rural small business owners, and I'm happy to report that our Mississippi witnesses reflected the surging optimism measured in the latest National Federation of Independent Business survey. Here at the Small Business Committee, we like to think that small business owners' optimism is, at least in part, a result of the hard work that we do here in this room on both sides of the aisle, because this, as I always like to say, is a committee that really does work in a bipartisan fashion as much as possible. Of course, the committee cannot take all the credit. The historic progress made to reduce tax and regulatory burdens on America's small businesses as a result of congressional action and support from the White House as well, and obviously particularly for the hard work of small businesses all across America. That's where the real effort is, and we're seeing the result of that now. We rely on local policymakers and community organizations to implement reforms, develop innovative support systems, and advocate for our nation's 30.2 million small businesses. From South Haven to Simi Valley, small businesses are creating more jobs, reinvesting in their employees, updating new equipment, and setting higher goals for growth. That doesn't mean we can take our foot off the gas pedal. There's a lot more work to be done. This committee, we're here today to highlight communities that have developed thriving small business ecosystems. In your community, you may see shops run by local artisans and farmers and restaurateurs, but you probably won't see what is happening behind the scenes. Every small business ecosystem relies on a delicate balance of support and resources to survive. The creation of a healthy ecosystem requires significant investment by all participants, small business owners, support organizations, and policymakers. To be successful, each ecosystem develops according to the unique needs of its location. No two main streets are identical. Each community capitalizes on its own unique offering. Policymakers and support organizations like the ones we have on this panel have developed innovative strategies, resources, and measurements to ensure local small businesses are thriving. Our witnesses will detail the investments required for a business-friendly community. They will also discuss the economic, social, and cultural impact of small business investment. I've observed this phenomenon in my district, specifically on the revitalized Over the Rhine neighborhood. And I would look forward to hearing more success stories from our witnesses today, and I'm grateful for their participation here and their efforts back in their communities. And I would now like to yield to the gentlelady, Ms. Clark, for the purpose of making the opening statement. The ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, is not able to be with us right now, but I think we'll be here later, or yeah. So
it's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you, for yielding to our panelists. We want to welcome you and your expert testimony here today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our nation's 30 million small businesses play a critical role in their local communities. However, starting a small business isn't easy. 9 out of 10 startups fail because of a multitude of obstacles that stand between an entrepreneur and a successful business. For startups to succeed, they need access to capital, a solid business plan, and a strong workforce. Although SBA offers some of these services nationally, local entrepreneurial and small business development programs can provide tailor-made solutions to fit the community. Today, we have representatives from several municipalities that are filling this gap and helping Main Street America grow. These programs are set up around the country and offer a variety of incentives and services that make starting and growing a business easier. From finding a business location to developing the skills of young workers, such services provide the catalyst for small businesses to thrive. Some provide financial incentives like specialized grants and loans so businesses can hire more workers or expand workspace. In fact, our witness today, the New York City Department of Small Business Services, is offering a loan program for women and minority business owners to help traditionally underserved portions of the community. But they offer much more than just financial incentives. Local organizations provide site selection services to help firms maximize exposure to their target markets and identify new customers. Through professional counseling, which can range from pro bono legal assistance to business planning, innovators can learn how to optimally run their operations for success. Finally, we all know a business is only as strong as its workforce. To that end, some localities have begun offering grants and tax incentives for apprenticeships and on-the-job training. This allows workers to gain valuable new skills so businesses are better able to compete in the marketplace. This hearing gives us the opportunity to analyze the innovative ideas deployed by our witnesses and explore what makes a town, city, or county a great place for small business. It is my hope that we can establish a set of best practices for these programs which can be used by other municipalities and future federal programs to stimulate small business growth. Thank you all for being here today. I appreciate our witnesses taking time from their busy schedules to join us. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady yields back. And if committee members have opening statements, I'd ask that they be submitted for the record. And we'll take just a moment to explain our rules relative to timing. Pretty simple. You get 5 minutes, and then we get 5 minutes to ask questions. And there's some lights to assist you there. The green light will be on for 4 minutes. The yellow light will come on, and it'll be on for 1 minute. And then the red light will come on to let you know the 5 minutes is up. And if you could kind of stay within those parameters, we would greatly appreciate it. And I will now we'll go ahead and introduce our distinguished panel here this morning, and I would like to yield to the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Luetkemeyer, who's the vice chairman of this committee, to introduce our first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce today one of my constituents, Greg Prestman, who serves as the president and CEO of the Economic Development Council of St. Charles, Missouri, where he has worked to provide startup assistance, small business financing, and business attraction and retention programs for St. Charles County, there in my 3rd congressional district. Mr. Prestman has dedicated his career to making St. Charles County the most attractive destination for entrepreneurs and small businesses alike. Prior to coming to St. Charles EDC, Mr. Prestman was the executive director for the Grinnell 2000 Foundation, where he directed a multi-community development program. Previously, Mr. Prestman worked as a professional economic developer in New York. We won't hold that against him because he's become Missourianized now. He's one of us. Mr. Prestman attended the University of Iowa, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Government and subsequent Master of Arts degree in Economic Development with a concentration in Development Finance. Mr. Prestman, thank you for being here. Always a pleasure to see you. Welcome, Greg, and look forward to your testimony.
Thank you very much. And our next witness will be Derek Miller, the newly appointed president and CEO of the Salt Lake Chamber and Downtown Alliance. Mr. Miller previously served as Chief of Staff to Governor Gary Herbert and as Managing Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development under Governor John Huntsman, Jr. He began his career in Washington, D.C., and spent 3 years as the legal counsel of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and we thank you for your participation. Our third witness will be Ms. Vanessa Wagner, who serves as Loudoun County's Small Business and Entrepreneurship Manager. In this capacity, she's dedicated to supporting small businesses and growing the entrepreneur ecosystem in the county. She has more than 10 years of marketing and program development experience with small business and international organizations, and we welcome you here as well, Ms. Wagner. And I would now like to yield to the acting ranking member, Ms. Clark, for the purpose of introducing our fourth and final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services, Mr. Greg Bishop is charged with running a dynamic city agency focused on equity of opportunity, economic self-sufficiency, and mobility for New York City's diverse communities. SBS actively connects New Yorkers to good jobs, creates stronger businesses, and builds a thriving economy in neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. A New York City native, Mr. Bishop began his career at the agency in 2008, designing programs to make it easier for businesses to start and grow and to recover from emergencies. After a number of successful promotions, he was appointed commissioner by Mayor Bill de Blasio in November of 2015. Mr. Bishop holds a master's degree from Florida State University, a BS from Florida A&M University, and he is also a graduate of Harvard Kennedy School's Senior Executives in State and Local Government Program. Thank you for being here today. And on a side note, Mr. Prestman, once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. I yield back.
The gentlelady's comment will be stricken from the record. No, just kidding. Just kidding. I'm not a judge here. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm from Ohio. Yeah. So, but we appreciate the sentiments. And I would, before we get to Mr. Prestman, I would just remind folks that we are going to have votes here shortly. If you hear the buzzers go off, just ignore them, and we'll try to get through a number of these. We have 15 minutes to get over there, so we'll probably, even after that, and then it'll go off again 5 minutes later, and we may still go on, but members will have time to get over and vote. So, Mr. Prestman, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I very much appreciate this opportunity. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm
Could
proud
you
of
pull the mic up a little bit? It'll come right. Yeah.
And I am proud of having spent a little time in New York, so especially in August, which is much nicer. I represent a 30-member board of directors that is a true public-private partnership. We have 10 local government representatives and 20 private sector folks. So, and I'm representing a county that has about 400,000 people, somewhere north of 9,000 small businesses. And so we have a really simple mission, as far as I'm concerned, is to help businesses and the communities in our county to succeed and grow. You know, and ever since the EDC's inception in 1992, we've concentrated the lion's share of our resources on small business development, for sure. We do this through two main flagship programs. We are what's called a Certified Development Company, or CDC, so we operate the 504 loan program, which is ultimately under your jurisdiction here, and we're a pretty big player in that. We have a portfolio today of about 120 million and almost 300 loans from all across the state of Missouri. But we're also an important participant in the University of Missouri's Small Business Technology Development Center program, which is a mouthful. While our local impacts have been large, I think the statewide impacts are even more important. I think are stunning. From 2015 to 2017, the statewide network of SPTDCs, which are very thinly staffed, by the way, have helped generate over $1 billion in annual sales for those companies that they served, and north of $1 billion in procurement awards, which I know is something that's close to the heart of this committee. That's through the PTAC program, which is part of that SPDC network. But enough about the numbers. I want to talk about the principles that we use at the EDC, and I think you'll find some commonality between what we do and what the other speakers were talking about. I think that we've been successful in part because we believe that all small businesses are important. We think the mom and pop retailer or the auto repair shop is just as important as the IT technology startup. We want those too, but we had to kind of serve the companies that come in front of us. So we're market oriented. So our approach is not to target a particular type of business, but instead to help what the market provides. So that all small business is important is our main principle. So the second one is that we strive to have all of our programs, and there are many, kind of be in alignment with each other. Even in a small organization, it's easy for silos to develop. So, for example, whenever we have a 504 borrower, we try very hard to make sure that they are SBDC clients as well, and vice versa. You know, that only makes sense because 504 borrowers need to repay federally guaranteed loans, and so we want them to be healthy for that reason, if no other. And then all SBDC clients, you hope, will get to a critical mass where they're in need of long-term fixed-rate financing that the 504 program provides. So that alignment, I think, is important. I think that we're somewhat unique in doing that in terms of the other CDCs around the United States. Second thing, we are trying to strive for our programs to be community sensitive. And I'll tell you a story. About 2 years ago, a company called Good News Brewing an entrepreneur came to us with an idea to set up a microbrewery in an area in St. Charles County that would not be considered to be trendy or chic and maybe out of favor. And through that process, we found that there was indeed a market. And to fast forward, They now have a thriving microbrewery business. Now they've come back to us for a second idea, again in an area that's not particularly in favor, to open up really kind of a high-end coffee shop. You know, it's something that, and this one will work too. That kind of synergy between the best of the SBDC and the best of the financing programs will be, you know, it has really borne fruit, and I think it's potentially could be a game changer for this kind of older area of St. Charles County. And I think that story you could find all across the United States, and I know I could tell you dozens of them, but that would be an example. And finally, we are able to do this because of strong partnerships. I mean, certainly the EDC made a difference in this particular company, but you know, between the University of Missouri, obviously the SBA, the City of O'Fallon, St. Charles County government, all of them had to coalesce around the goal of helping this individual small business and other businesses just like them. No one participant had all the ingredients to get this job done, but together they did. And this is a success story, and it's not a bad day's work for all of the people involved in this kind of thing. So on behalf of businesses and communities in St. Charles County, I want to give you thanks. 0.
Right on the dot. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Mr. Miller, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ms. Clark, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to speak to you today about Utah's thriving small business ecosystem. Utah's economy is one of the best in the nation. Utah ranks #1 in the U.S. for job growth and enjoys consistently low unemployment. I'm proud to say that small business is at the heart of this success, with over 277,000 small businesses that make up 99% of Utah companies and 57% of total employees. Now, you may be asking yourself, as a visiting Chinese diplomat asked me recently, how did a state I've never heard of become the fastest growing economy in the United States of America? I want to share with you what I shared with this diplomat, 4 areas that I believe are fundamental to Utah's economic success. The first is a growing and educated workforce. Any business will tell you if they can't find good people, then nothing else matters. Utah's public education system has a strong partnership with our business community to identify and fill gaps in our workforce. One way this collaboration is evident is through the Talent Ready Utah initiative, which includes technical training for students throughout high school so they graduate not only with a degree, but with a high-wage, high-demand job. The second factor is taxes and regulation. Utah benefits economically from our flat 5% personal and corporate tax rate. Low taxes are important to small businesses, but equally important is a stable tax rate. Utah's tax rate has not risen in nearly 20 years. In 2011, the state conducted one of the most thorough regulatory reviews in the nation. The experience that gave rise to this reform was a small business owner who wondered aloud, why can I not fax or email my license renewal instead of having to mail it? The question spurred a regulation review, caused us to look at the regulation, and sure enough, the rule only allowed for mail. No email, no fax, and certainly no online renewal. A closer inspection showed that the rule was written in 1973. Based on this experience, Governor Herbert asked each member of his cabinet to review every state regulation and ask 2 simple questions. Does the rule impact business, and what is the public purpose? In nearly 400 instances, there was no good answer to that second question, and so those rules were either modified or eliminated. The third factor is incentives. Incentivizing business creation and sustainable growth is key to Utah's thriving small business ecosystem. There are several state programs that assist new and existing businesses. One example is the Utah Science, Technology, and Research, or USTAR initiative, that specifically assists startup and early-stage tech companies like Envy Composites, a small business that designs and manufactures carbon fiber bicycle wheels and components. The final area is international trade. It may surprise you to find out how important trade is to an inland state like Utah. Trade is not killing Utah. In fact, in Utah is killing it when it comes to trade. Let me share with you a story that illustrates the point. Butcher's Bunches makes all natural fruit preserves. The Butcher family began selling their product at a farmer's market in Park City to tourists from around the world. They began asking Liz Butcher how they could buy her jam at their home. Liz had never considered selling outside of the United States, but the encouragement from her customers gave her the confidence to try. And today she sells to Japan, the UK, France, Australia, Canada, and Dubai. These are all ways I believe Utah is doing it right when it comes to supporting small businesses. But that does not mean that those companies don't face challenges. In fact, in some rural areas of our state, the economic story is very different from what I have just described. To address this, Governor Herbert set a goal to create 25,000 jobs in 25 rural counties. I was grateful to lead the 25K jobs tour that kicked off this goal. Over 20 business service providers visited the 25 rural counties to connect local businesses and their job seekers with available tools and resources. Based on my experience on the 25K jobs tour, may I just mention what I think is the most important element of Utah's economic success? That is our people. Utah's small business owners, whether in urban Salt Lake City or rural Salina, epitomize our state's motto of industry. They are good, hardworking people with a strong entrepreneurial spirit. Utah's pioneering heritage is alive and well across the state, from Grouse Creek to Montezuma Creek. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. And the buzzer just went off. We have 15 minutes, so we should be able to get through the final two, if they keep on their 5 minutes, as these two did. So, Ms. Wagner, you were recognized for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. I would like to begin by thanking the Congressional Small Business Committee for inviting me to testify today on behalf of Loudoun County Economic Development and our small business partners. As the Small Business Entrepreneurship Manager, I'm charged with building an entrepreneurial ecosystem to ensure we have the programs, people, and places so that our small businesses can thrive. While my focus is on technology startups, the programs we support help our Main Street businesses as well. So one of the things I would like to urge today is building an ecosystem around your community's unique advantages will prove more sustainable and impactful than placing a trend in the middle of your city. What I learned in my experience, and I'll admit, when I started as a stakeholder, I wanted to hit all the buzzwords. I wanted to find out all of the new co-working spaces, the venture capitalists. I chased around all of the pitch events. What I quickly learned in my role is that we already had the resources we need in Loudoun County to be successful. And one of those biggest resources I encourage people to look at and identify is the existing businesses within their community. By utilizing a mix of your legacy businesses, your large giants, in addition to your small growing companies, that's where you're going to find the talent and the experience, as well as the inspiration for your next generation of businesses. I want to start by talking about some of the giants in your community or the legacy businesses that could help support an entrepreneurial ecosystem. In Loudoun County and the DC region, one of the most impactful organizations in our history remains America Online, or AOL. From 1994 through its growth into the 21st century, AOL had a giant impact on our region. Not only did they develop the region's technology workforce, but also the spirit of innovation. When AOL moved its headquarters from Dulles to New York in 2007, it continued to have an impact on our region. It left behind a wake of tech talent, but also executives that later became future founders, as well as angel and institutional investors for our next generation. Even after the presence of AOL began to slow down, the company continued to have an impact. They worked to create an incubator within their walls, allowing new startups to come inside, utilize the existing infrastructure, the talent that they had, the human resources, and today our region is benefiting from the results of these efforts. In Loudoun County in particular, that has inspired a new wave of startups, companies like Mill Advisor, Park My Cloud, Xmode Social, and many others in the area. As the entrepreneurship manager in Loudoun, I didn't seek to change what was working with this legacy business or their impact. Rather, it was my role to promote this opportunity to the right startups. This could be as simple as an email introduction or sponsoring events to be hosted at the facility so that new entrepreneurs could be inspired by the potential. These relationships, as Fishbowl Labs did end up leaving Loudoun County, the relationships forged still continued to help our community, because when those companies were suddenly finding themselves without a home or an incubator, we were able to work with another entrepreneur in the community to place them in a new building, Terminal 68. At that time, one of the companies, Xmode Social, only had 10 employees, But through the investment of time made from the entrepreneurs and the talent already in our community, that company had 10 employees back in August and is now pushing 40. And that's utilizing our legacy resources. But relying on the largest employers is providing a disservice to your entrepreneurs. Facilitating introductions and relationships to your growing companies and early stage entrepreneurs should be included in any community strategy. Loudoun Small Business Partners leverage growing firms such as Omnalert, Cofence, Telos, K2M, amongst others. The advantage of working with this new cohort of technology firms is that they can provide recent examples of challenges and solutions faced in building their business. Our growth firms are invested in the region because, as they say, all ships rise with the tide. A community has to seek unique ways to make these interactions. For us in Loudoun, leveraging our chamber and the Loudoun Technology Coalition is a natural way. For example, our cybersecurity firm Telos, one of the fastest growing cyber firms in the country, they sponsor the Tech Coalition and work to enhance the programming there. Just last week, we had 3 executive members from Telos sit with our small startups, our entrepreneurs, our solopreneurs, to talk about trends in cyber. And when I left, the conversations were still going, so the results of these interactions is still yet to be known. So when entrepreneurship catalysts are seeking to build on to their entrepreneurial ecosystems or their resources, they don't need to look much further than their existing businesses. This is where you're going to find strong assets for mentorship, experience, and support in building your next generation of entrepreneurs. My testimony focuses on examples related to technology-enabled firms, but if I had more time, I could easily sit here and give you examples of how this helped our rural community, our craft beverage industry, and many more. One size does not fit all for entrepreneurship, and I encourage you to look at your existing resources first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bishop, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Shabbat, and sitting in for Ranking Member Velasquez, Representative Clark, and other members of the House Small Business Committee. My name is Greg Bishop, and I'm the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. I thank you for this opportunity to testify before the committee and share some of the great work and best practices that we are seeing in New York City. At SBS, we aim to unlock economic potential and create economic security for all New Yorkers by connecting them to quality jobs, building stronger businesses, and fostering thriving neighborhoods. Unlike other city agencies that work with businesses, we do not enforce regulations, but rather provide the necessary services to help them start, operate, and grow. We provide services to New York City's 230,000 small businesses through our network of 7 business solution centers and 8 industrial business service providers. At SBS, we know that small businesses are essential to the local economy and character of our neighborhoods. Despite the fact that small businesses face challenges due to the unprecedented growth New York City has seen in recent years, our small businesses continue to grow. Over the last 10 years, the number of businesses in New York City have increased by 10%, according to the U.S. Census County Business Patterns Report. That is why I believe it is critical for municipalities to incorporate small businesses into their economic development strategy, because it not only helps small businesses grow, but also provide their city with good jobs, vibrant neighborhoods, and a better quality of life. Many small businesses struggle to access credit, so SBS provides free financing services through our business centers. We work regularly with more than 40 different lenders, the majority of which are community development financial institutions and other financial institutions. CDFIs play a critical role in our efforts to providing financing to businesses that are not able to access traditional bank financing. Since the start of this administration, SBS has connected approximately 1,800 businesses to over $155 million in financing. As we see businesses grow in New York City, the city has also implemented necessary regulations or worker protections. Regulations are important to ensure health and public safety, but they should be fair and not overly burdensome to small business owners. In 2015, the mayor launched Small Business First, a major multi-agency effort to reduce the regulatory burden and help businesses understand and comply with city regulations. To make it easier, we built a state-of-the-art NYC business portal to serve as a central repository of key business information and a single place for business interactions with the city. On the NYC business portal, a business owner can create an account, link their licenses, permits, inspections, and violations from city agencies onto one dashboard. In 2017, there were more than 1 million visits to the NYC Business Portal. A key focus of our work is ensuring our programming is accessible to all New Yorkers, including women entrepreneurs. Through extensive research and outreach, we developed We NYC, a series of programs to address the most common challenges women entrepreneurs face. Most recently, we launched We Fund Crowd, a city-led crowdfunding program that helps women entrepreneurs access affordable capital and start businesses. We NYC has been a great success, and other cities have taken notice, with Boston recently launching their own Women Entrepreneurs Boston program modeled on We NYC. Growing up with my grandmother in Grenada, who supported our household as a women entrepreneur, I came to understand firsthand that business ownerships can empower a family and support greater economic opportunity for future generations. With approximately 6 out of 10 New Yorkers being either immigrants or children of immigrants, and nearly half of small businesses owned by immigrant entrepreneurs, New York City has always been and will continue to be a city of immigrants. To that end, SBS created Building Your Business in New York City, a guide for immigrant entrepreneurs, which is available in 7 languages. Through the use of the city's purchasing power, the New York City Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program aims to support the growth of minority and women-owned businesses and ensure our vendors reflect the diversity of our city. At SBS, we provide essential capacity building services and technical assistance so businesses can compete for and execute government contracts. The Procurement Technical Assistance Center, funded in part by the Department of Defense and administered by the Defense Logistics Agency, offers critical support to small businesses. We believe that in order for small businesses to gain and sustain growth, they must be prepared to take advantage of multiple revenue streams, particularly minority, women, veteran, and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses that have historically not had access to government contracting opportunities. As you can see, New York City has made small businesses a priority, and as a result, we have seen them flourish. We hope municipalities from across the country use New York City as a model and replicate our successes by recognizing the strength and diversity in our city and helping immigrant, women, Black entrepreneurs, and other entrepreneurs of color to grow thriving businesses and careers. We are ensuring every New Yorker has access to economic security while growing our city's economy. Thank you for the opportunity to share the importance of small businesses in New York City and cities across the nation. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate all the witnesses for staying right on time. We appreciate it. We're going to be in recess for a little while. We have votes, and then we'll be back here to follow up with questions. So I would encourage all members to come back as quickly as they can after votes, and we are in recess.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
the committee will come back to order, and we will hopefully be joined by some of our colleagues here shortly. And we have been joined by our ranking member, the real ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, although Ms. Clark did a fine job filling in for her. So I recognize myself for 5 minutes. My first question, Mr. Pressman, you had mentioned that one of the loan programs that you deal with in your capacity is the 504 loan program. And you know, we hear a lot about the 7A loan program. 504 not quite as known by the public, and I know that we have the Hamilton County Development Corporation back in my area in Cincinnati, Ohio, and they do use that program a lot. Could you kind of tell folks who may not be familiar with it how it works and how businesses can take advantage of it?
The 504 program is a long-term fixed rate, fixed asset program. So which just so typically 20-year amortization, and it's always done in partnership with a bank. So basically, the bank lends at the end of the process 50% of the proceeds and we come in as the agents for the SBA to underwrite the other 40%, and then the borrower would typically have a 10% equity.
Okay. In general, how would a small business qualify for that program or try to take advantage of it?
Yeah, well, they need to be, first of all, they need to have a reasonable cash flow. You know, so they need it's underwritten to standards very similar to what any bank would underwrite it to. So they have to be able to show that they can cover debt service, and they have to be financing a fixed asset, so land, building, machinery, and equipment. But there's virtually any kind of business can be financed through it as long as it has a fixed asset that would be financed.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, I'll turn to you next. You had mentioned in your testimony, I thought it was interesting, you mentioned in particular a program, I think your governor in your state, you had gotten rid of a bunch of regulations which, you know, no longer really made any sense. How important is it for us at the federal level and also for local communities to get rid of regulations that really don't have any real purpose anymore?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize that sometimes when we talk about regulatory reform, that can be viewed as a political issue or even a partisan issue, but I don't believe it needs to be. And the reason I shared the story that I did about the not being able to email or fax, I think is a good illustration of the many regulations that, at least in Utah, that we found were on the books. No one had ever gone back and looked at it again. You know, of course, a law that was written in 1973 wouldn't talk about email, wouldn't even talk about fax, and certainly wouldn't talk about online. But we like to say in Utah that regulations are like weeds in the ditch. They just build up and they impede the flow of commerce unless you go back on a regular basis and look at what has been outdated, look at what doesn't make sense anymore, and look at what needs to be updated. And certainly, when we talk to small businesses in Utah, what they tell us, they were grateful for the regulatory reform on the state level, by the way, but what they tell us would not surprise you, which is that regulatory review needs to happen on a federal level as well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Wagner, I'll turn to you next. How do you market your community, like Loudoun County and the area, to prospective businesses in the areas, well, when it comes to such criteria as anticipated operating costs, operating conditions, quality of life, those types of things? How do you, how do you go about marketing those when you're trying to get folks, attract people to your community?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the question. In Loudoun County, we have a team of over 20 members that represent different industry sectors, those from agriculture, aviation, transportation, cybersecurity, health information, and those individuals go out and identify opportunities in conjunction with our marketing team and strategic initiatives team, companies from across the globe, really, to identify companies that might be looking at new office space expansion, and making sure that we have solutions to their problems or identify opportunities that fit that particular industry cluster.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Bishop, I'll turn to you with the remaining time that I have. You're from New York City, and I represent the city of Cincinnati, most of it, as well as the surrounding area. Are there advantages and disadvantages that urban areas like your community, New York, has say compared to the state of Utah or the state of Mississippi when it comes to marketing and arguing, you know, the good things you have versus the challenges? What are kind of the advantages or disadvantages that you like to key in on when you're talking about an urban area like New York?
Yeah, so thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So I think New York has one of the advantages, of course, we're a global city. And certainly there's a diversity of a consumer base for a small business. There's certainly a number of resources that small businesses can tap into, not only on a local level, but on the federal level in terms of actually helping grow their business. I think that also leads to the disadvantage in the fact that there's a lot of price pressures. And we may not be as forgiving in terms of if you do not have a solid plan or you're not sure of how to actually grow your business. You in an urban area where you may be able to, you may not be able to recover as quickly if you're in a rural area, for example. There's a lot more competition. So what we do is we really try to make sure that small business owners are equipped with the necessary tools, not only to help them plan out their business, but grow their business, but also we provide a lot more resources for some of the things that business owners may not know what they need to know.
Thank you very much. My time's expired. The ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Bishop, thank you for sharing, being able to come here today and share your insights as to how can we improve small businesses' opportunities. I would like for you to talk to us about your agency's initiatives that is undertaking to help immigrants succeed, and what are the economic benefits in doing so?
So as I mentioned in my testimony, New York City is an immigrant-rich city. And certainly when you look at our 230,000 small businesses, the assumption is that the larger businesses are actually the economic drivers of the city in terms of the workforce. But it's actually our small businesses. Our small businesses employ over 3.9 million New Yorkers. And over 52% of those small businesses are owned by a foreign-born New Yorker. So it's essential for us to connect with immigrant communities. It's essential for us to provide resources to immigrant communities. So we actually have worked not only in developing programs, we've worked with the private sector as well in terms of funding some of these programs. So we work with local organizations to tap into some of those communities, to connect to our resources. Because most likely entrepreneurship is something that immigrants would veer to. And certainly if they are creating businesses, then they're creating jobs within the community. So that's important to New York City.
Thank you. One of my top priorities in this committee as the ranking member is helping the traditionally underserved communities access capital. What can you share with us and the federal government that you are doing in New York to help women and minority communities access capital?
Right. So thank you again for that question. One of the things that we're doing, particularly when we did our outreach to women entrepreneurs, we found out that women entrepreneurs face other barriers than their male counterparts. So we built out a program called We NYC specifically for women entrepreneurs that not only covers access to capital. We've teamed up with an organization called Kiva, where the city is now putting in the first 10% of their loan requests, and that's up to $10,000. We also are putting together resources for women entrepreneurs to connect with other successful women entrepreneurs. Mentorship is one of the biggest things that we found that women entrepreneurs were looking for. Access to capital was the other. And then some of my colleagues have talked about in terms of recruiting and finding the right workers. In terms of helping minority business owners, the city of New York is using its purchasing power. We spend anywhere between $12 and $13 billion a year to run the city. And we want to make sure that a percentage of that actually connects to small business, especially minority and women-owned businesses. But access to capital is an issue for minority entrepreneurs. So we actually created a $10 million fund where business owners can borrow up to $500,000 if they have a city contract. So that helps that business not only mobilize on the contract, but build their credit to then become a bank-worthy customer.
Thank you. Mr. President, the gender wage gap is an issue across the country. It is my understanding that in St. Charles County, men earn an average of 1.4 times more than women. Are there ways your organization can incentivize businesses to close that gap?
Oh boy, I'm not familiar with that statistic specifically. I can tell you that I'm not. I would say that the about 40% of the entrepreneurs that we work with are women-owned businesses. So women are certainly active participants in the ecosystem, the entrepreneurship ecosystem in St. Charles County as well as in the St. Louis area. But I think the wage gap, it's kind of above my pay grade in terms of our ability. We don't have a policy setting role.
Okay, so I'm going to give you an easy one.
Thank you.
So the United States is losing manufacturing jobs to outsourcing every day. However, St. Charles County's top employer is the manufacturing sector, accounting for 26,000 jobs. What can the federal government and other municipalities learn from your ability to attract manufacturing jobs?
Well, although I can't take credit for it from the EDC standpoint. I think that we have a vibrant workforce and a workforce development system that's working well. So our community college has been actively engaged with training and retraining workers. We were very fortunate that General Motors, even in the aftermath of the downturn in 2007 and 2008, ended up expanding in St. Charles County, and that has driven a good portion of those job base in St. Charles County. Manufacturing is a big targeted sector for sure, and we're seeing successes all around us.
Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Curtis, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the ranking member. It's a delight for me to be here. I'm grateful for all four witnesses, but I will give you some bias that Mr. Derek Miller from Utah, particularly pleased to be here with you. Thanks to all of you for making this trip, and Derek, thanks for coming. I don't think it would be, hopefully Mr. Chairman wouldn't be out of line if I gave a shout out to Mr. Miller's family, who has accompanied him on this trip and is here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Miller, you've served as a CEO for the Salt Lake Chamber. You're serving now in that role. You've served as a CEO for the World Trade Center. You were the chief of staff to the governor of our state. You've spent some time back here. Thank you for bringing all those qualifications with you today to answer some of these questions. It makes me really proud to come from Utah, where we're doing so many things right, but need to continue to improve, especially for our small businesses. We're really proud of the work we've done with deregulation. Could you speak to how important it is that we don't overregulate, particularly our small businesses? And in addition, what else can we be doing here in Washington for our small businesses?
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. It's great to be here with you and the other members of the committee. And I shared the story about the email already, and I think there may be some who would think, come on, that's a small thing. Being able to email a business license instead of having to send it by U.S. Postal Service, and it's true. It is a small thing, but I guess the point that I want to make is that small things matter a lot to small businesses. Small businesses bear a disproportionate share of the burden when it comes to regulations because often they're either a family-owned business or a sole proprietor. They don't have resources. They don't have time to hire an army of lawyers to go out and study this stuff. They don't have the resources or the time to have compliance officers in their business. They're just working hard every single day to try to be a successful business, live the American dream for themselves and their family. And so you asked the question, what could the federal government do? I think it'd be a great place to start by doing what we did in Utah, which is to look at those regulations. It doesn't have to be political, it doesn't have to be partisan, but those that are just simply outdated. Those small things add up to be a very large burden to our small businesses.
I appreciate you pointing that out. Sometimes we think, well, they can just send that off to another department to have it done, right? And that's usually...
They are the other department.
They are the other department. We're experiencing an unusual economy in Utah and have for a number of years. Your unemployment in the Salt Lake Valley is 3% or maybe slightly less than 3%, and in Utah County. A lot of my district is rural, and in some places we're in double-digit unemployment. Can you address your thoughts on what can we do and how can we team with you and local leaders to help the rural economy and the rural small business owners?
Sure, thank you for that question. So when we went out on our 25K jobs tour, we discovered a couple of things. The first one is we have some parts of our state where the greatest challenge for the business is finding qualified workforce. That is their #1 top challenge. Yet we go out to some of the rural counties in our state, and their greatest challenge is finding jobs. Okay, well, you know, I don't claim to be a genius, but I can at least add 2 and 2. And when you do put 2 and 2 together, what you realize is that there are opportunities, especially in today's economy with so many of the tech businesses that you represent in your district, Congressman, who they have jobs that don't need to be located at headquarters, whatever headquarters means. There's an opportunity to take those jobs either by telecommuting or other technology, so that we are leading an effort right now that is part of Governor Herbert's 25,000 jobs goal to challenge our businesses that are part of the Salt Lake Chamber, challenge them to do a thorough review of the jobs that they currently have unfilled, to identify which of those jobs don't need to be located along the Wasatch Front or our urban core, and then we will help them connect with the local chambers of commerce and work with them to match the unfilled job with the person in those rural communities who is looking for a job.
I hope you'll consider me and my colleagues partners in this, whether it's nothing more than the bully pulpit or facilitating or work that we can actually do here, but I definitely want to be a partner in that goal. It's a great goal. Lastly, you described in your testimony that the trade is not hurting Utah, but actually helping. Could you elaborate on that and talk about why and how that's so important in the state of Utah?
Sure. Utah, as I mentioned, is a trade state. If we were only selling to our 3 million citizens, we would not be seeing the economic success that we are. Nevertheless, we recognize that free trade is good, but it has to be fair trade. So we believe that, and we believe that Congress also ought to assert its role in making sure that, for example, NAFTA is modernized. If we are going to pull out to other trade agreements like the TPP or the TTIP, then let's put something in its place. Our small businesses need rules-based trading. Again, they don't have the opportunity to go out and make those deals on their own. They look to the U.S. government. They look to you, members of Congress, to go establish their rules for them that will give them the predictability and the stability they will need to continue to be successful.
Thank you. I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman, but I'd love just to undermine that predictability that they're looking for that we need to give them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gentleman's time has expired. And we're going to go briefly into a second round. We had votes, as you know, that interrupted this, and unfortunately, many of our members had other things they then had to go to. We usually don't have votes in the morning that interrupt this, but we had a lot of business this week that we had to take care of, still do, so I apologize for that. So I just have one question that I'll throw out, and anyone who would like to take it can, or if you want to go down the line, we can do that too. Question is this: many communities use geographic targeted economic development programs to create jobs and attract investment. What role do small businesses play in neighborhood revitalization plans? And have you ever are there any socioeconomic returns that you've observed over the years in this area? So whoever wants to tackle that is we're welcome. Ms. Wagner?
Sure. When we talk about geographic targeted plans, one of the opportunities we take advantage of in Loudoun County is we do have a designated hub zone program. And that we work very hard to foster our government contractors that are in that sector, that are small businesses, by providing resources through our Small Business Development Center, partnered with George Mason University's Procurement Technical Assistance Program, as well as with our Loudoun Chamber's Government Contracting Initiative. Because helping those hub zone companies, they are hiring within the hub zone, which is historically an underutilized business district, for those not familiar with that. And we are creating jobs in that community by supporting the entrepreneurs in our hub zone in Leesburg, Virginia.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any of the other panel members like to address that? Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're probably thinking I haven't bragged on Utah enough, so I'll just take another moment. We have great geographic assets, from our Rocky Mountains in the northern part of the state to our Red Rock in the south, and we use that to our advantage in a couple of ways. The first one, of course, is the quality of life that it presents. When I talked earlier about the need that we have for talented workforce, you can believe that we use that quality of life to market the heck out of Utah and attract talent from all around the world to come and work in our businesses. We are the fastest growing state in the nation, and most people think that comes from a high birth rate, but that's only half the story. That's something we do in Utah very well, by the way, is have families. But the half of our population growth comes from net in-migration, people moving into Utah. And the second way that we use that is in the economic clusters that we've identified where we believe we have a competitive advantage. And one of those is our outdoor recreation industry. So we have not just the talented workforce to build all of the equipment that can be used to recreate outdoors, but we also have the playground to go out and test the equipment.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any others? Yes, Mr. Bishop?
So one of the things I can't let the gentleman from Utah show up, New York State, New York City, but one of the things you hear consistently is that, you know, small businesses are essential to the success of all our communities. Certainly in New York, we focus, because, you know, in Brooklyn alone, we have 3.2 million people. The city as a whole has 8.9. We have to make sure that small businesses understand some of the neighborhoods that they're operating in because they are unique and distinct. We do have industrial business zones because we want to focus on maintaining the manufacturing businesses that are in New York City. So the businesses within those areas also have special services and incentives to remain in those areas to provide the much needed jobs. And we really work to integrate the work that's happening in those manufacturing because manufacturing is changing, the type of manufacturing is changing to make sure that our educational system actually keeps up with that. So there's a lot of connectivity between not only small businesses and the different neighborhoods of New York City, but also our academic institutions to make sure, as you've heard all of us say, that our workforce is prepared for the future of tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pressman, anything you want to add?
I would just add I think even in a place like St. Charles County that's, you know, very, very prosperous, there are areas of the county that are not doing as well. And, you know, I think that the illustration that I made with this Good News Brewing Company was that first of all, there was indeed a market, but that it had to be discovered. It wouldn't have been obvious. So I think, you know, increasing the sophistication of the entrepreneur in and of itself is a good thing. And there is a synergy that takes place once investments start. You know, disinvestment cycles are tough to reverse. Yep. But they, you know, require I would say coordinated public investment in roads and that kind of thing. But also, you have to find that entrepreneur that has that fire in his or her belly and it won't be denied. And that's what we found in this case. So.
Thank you very much. I got 10 seconds left, so I would just mention that you mentioned microbreweries and how successful. We've had a slew of them in Cincinnati that are doing very well.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a phenomenon that's happening all over the country. America likes its beer.
Apparently, yeah. And coffee. So,
and,
you know,
yeah, coffee as well. That's right. And the gentleman from Utah is recognized for 5 minutes, and I'll be our last questioner here today.
Thank you. Not that we're tag teaming on how great Utah is, but we don't do a lot of beer and coffee, but we've got great ice cream. You know, I was a small business owner before, and I can't tell you how many times I said to myself and my partners, why don't they get this in Washington, right? So I'd like to give all four of you a moment to say, what is it that you would like to express, that you talk about around the coffee and saying, I wish in Washington they got this one thing. In New York and Virginia and Missouri and Utah. Is there something that you would like me and my colleagues to hear? Let's start with Mr. Miller from Utah.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. So we've talked about regulatory reform and we've talked about trade deals. Let me hit what I think is the other of the big three, and that is immigration reform. That's a hot topic in Washington, D.C. right now. It's important to Utah, as you know, as someone who owned a business in Utah. We need those qualified workers. We need them to be part of not just our agricultural businesses, but we need them to be part of our tech businesses, our manufacturing businesses, all up and down the line. Utah is a state, as you know, that was founded by refugees, religious refugees, who at the time they got there were outside of the United States, had been driven out. And so we're a state that's very sensitive to that topic, not just from a business issue, but from a cultural and a moral issue as well. And so immigration reform would be so critical to keeping the good thing that we have going in Utah going.
That's also very timely. Mr. Pristerman.
I would, my observation would be one size fits all regulation that applies equally to a company of 5,000 employees to a company with 5 is a recipe for big problems. I hear far more about navigating regulatory burdens than I do about high taxes. Not that there's not a need for continued attention to tax, but tax burden. But I think regulatory burden is the main thing. And I can only imagine the difficulty of crafting rules that work in that environment. But that is a persistent complaint that you'll hear about. It's pretty much to your point. If you're a really small business, you can't just hand this over to the regulatory division either. Yeah. You're that too.
I'm often out among businesses and I say, well, how'd you like tax reform? And they say, well, that was nice, but what's really helped is deregulation.
That would be what I've heard too.
Yeah, Ms. Wagner.
For the clients I serve, which are a lot of technology startups, the biggest challenge they have overcoming is the attraction of tech talent and the availability of that. So investment in our technology workforce, both in uptraining and upskilling the current workforce, as well as investing in our next generation of technology employment, is probably the biggest concern facing many of my clients today.
Thank you. Mr. Bishop.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit and say I have two things.
I'd love to hear both.
And certainly you've heard it from Mr. Miller, the importance of immigrant and immigrations. And, New York City, as I said, is powered by immigrant entrepreneurs. And certainly we want to make sure that we create opportunities for immigrants to create businesses, because those businesses will hire within their communities. And I want to stress that. It's so important. It's important to New York City's economy. The other thing that I said that I wanted to make sure that you understand is that the success of American businesses is dependent on our workforce, and we have to make sure that our workforce is prepared for the technologies of tomorrow. And in certain areas, they're not. And certainly we have to make sure we've made investments in New York City to ensure, either through apprenticeship programs or working with industry, to identify and project in the next 3 to 5 years what are the skill sets that those companies need in order to grow. Because if they're not going to, if we as a country can't provide the workforce, then they're going to go to other countries that can. And certainly we need to make sure that our education system provides the pipeline of the next engineers, the next computer programmers, et cetera. So that's very important for the success of our small businesses.
Those were 4 great messages. We need to make sure all our colleagues hear all 4 of those. So thank you very much for your time today, and I yield my time.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. And I spoke too soon because the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, who's a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Health and Technology, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to the committee. And I'm sorry I was late, but I was addressing a small business group from Florida who is up on Capitol Hill. And one of the things that I wanted to say is that there are more small businesses in this country than any other type of businesses. Yet a lot of the incentives that states and counties, countries offer for larger companies to move into the cities and the towns to create jobs. And we hear that all the time. And we have the Chamber of Commerce that are going out and recruiting, and most of the time they're not recruiting small business, they are always recruiting large firms. What incentives are available specifically? If you've already discussed them, I hate to go back over, for small businesses to create jobs that states should consider, and that is extremely important. Even from the standpoint of having served in the legislature in Florida for a long time, 28 years, 18 years in the House, 10 years in the Senate before coming here, the governors and everybody when they come in the state, the first thing they do, they focus is on recruiting those business from Canada, every place else, and say we're going to bring more jobs. But still, the largest employers are small business. So what should be focused on to make sure that small business get the same kind of consideration? And that's the question for everyone on the committee, wherever you want to start.
Thank you for that question. I am going to start with a line we use a lot in Loudoun, that no amount of incentives make a bad location a good location. I am proud that Virginia does offer various programs to support our small businesses through Virginia Jobs Investment Program, which provides credits and opportunities for small businesses that are hiring employees and making small investments into their infrastructure. We also have the CIT Gap Funds program, which is a state program that is a seed venture to help our technology-based businesses scale up quickly. It also helps them connect with future investors for subsequent fundraising rounds. And we do put a lot of effort in Virginia into helping technology firms better understand the grants available through the federal government, like SBIR and STTR funds. That really is America's seed fund. What I will say is I do feel that communities, when they're looking at investments or incentives for their small businesses, should really look at how they can maximize their current programs. If you can help your small business development centers, your chambers, those can have a greater reach and reach a greater amount of small businesses versus one or two companies that you can pour an incentive into. So in Loudoun County, we support our Mason Enterprise Center Incubator and the Small Business Development Center so that they can reach, this past year alone, they reached over 300 businesses in their programs. And we're seeing that trickle-down effect as those companies are remaining in the community, adding jobs and growing, and then can hopefully qualify for some of those larger incentive programs down the line. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for the question. And you're absolutely right when you talk about the importance of small businesses. I can tell you in Utah, they represent over 99% of all of our businesses, and the majority of the employees work for small businesses. In Utah, I happened to, in a previous career, run the incentive program for the state, and so I'm very sensitive to the question and the issue that you've raised. In Utah, we created what we call the BEAR program, the Business Expansion and Retention Program, specifically designed for and targeted to small businesses. However, at the time I was working for the state, our largest incentive program, we refer to it as the EdTIF, or the Economic Development Tax Increment Financing Program. With that long name, you can understand why it goes by its acronym. That program was only to recruit new business in the state of Utah. When our current governor was elected, he asked the very important question, why? Why is that program not available either for existing businesses or for businesses of any size? And so that program was modified, and I'm pleased to be able to tell you that today more than half of all of the companies that receive incentives do fit in those existing small business category.
Okay, Mr. Peterson.
President, actually, I do agree with you about the focus being on really big projects, typically on economic development programs. We have not gone that direction in St. Charles County, but I have 4 C's that we work off of. This is my little slogan here. Council, so at a council meeting, technical assistance, that's important to the companies. Capital, which is through both publicly sponsored as well as other programs. I'd say connection, which refers back to things like the procurement technical assistance centers and programs that help, again, upgrade the connections that small companies have to compete for large contracts. And then final one is community. And that's probably the softest one of the 4, but I think it's not to be dismissed in that entrepreneurs tend to make mistakes because they're in isolation. And so anything you can do to bring entrepreneurs together on a regular basis to guide and advise each other and support, I think that enhances the chances of their success.
Mr. Chairman, could I be granted 30 more seconds?
Yes, indeed.
Mr. Bishop, I understand you're a rattler.
I sure am.
Yeah, would you care to comment on that?
On being the rattler, or no? The best experience ever.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, and we are aligned, as you probably heard from the rest of the panel. In New York, we actually have our agency, Department of Small Business Services, was created to focus on small business services. We are a small business. We're actually not. We have another agency called Economic Development Corporation. So we actually have the 2 separates because we know that we need to provide additional resources to small businesses. So when we're interacting with a small business, we connect them to a host of services, not only from education, but the incentives that we have for small businesses. So for example, energy cost savings, we have customized training grants to help those small businesses train their employees. So we actually created a separate and distinct agency focused on retaining and helping small businesses. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back, and we want to thank our distinguished panel here both this morning and this afternoon. Sorry about the votes falling in between here and any inconvenience there, but for your excellent testimony. We rely on local experts like yourselves and your innovative strategies that you've put in place to better understand the needs of small businesses. And we're seeing success stories, I think, all over the country. And it's improving not only local economies, but people's lives. And we want to thank you for being an important part of that and explain to us how what we do here can help you to help people all over the country. So I want to thank folks on both sides of the aisle for being here. I would ask unanimous consent that members may have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record without objection so ordered. And if there is no further business to come before this committee, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Greg, it's nice to meet you.
Very good to meet you. Good remarks.
Thank you for sharing what you're doing. It's always nice to learn from others. Vanessa?